So today I have the Sony FX3. So the purpose of this video is to get you up and running as quickly as possible. So if you're one of those people that are new to using cameras and Sony cameras in general, I can assure you by the end of this video, you will be able to record video and take photos with your Sony FX3. So let's just get right into it. All right guys, so the first thing you're gonna wanna do is charge the battery. Now it comes with this charger, the cord, and the battery. So you just slide the battery on the top there and it kind of locks in like so. And then it has indicators here to show you the battery life. And mine was actually almost halfway charged when I got it, but I highly recommend just plugging this in until all three lights are green. Then you will have a fully charged battery. At that point, then you're ready to start following along. So now we have the FX3. Now, if you're looking at the bottom, we need to get the battery in there. So that goes in there like so. As you can see, just like this. So you see how it's keyed and it clicks into place. You can see that little blue lever there, and that's the lock lever. If you press that, the battery will pop up and then you can grab it. And you just close the door and slide the little latch over and that will lock it. Now, while we're looking at it from the bottom, you can see here, this is where you would screw to a tripod mount plate, so forth, and you have a vent here for the bottom, which is awesome. One of the reasons why you got this camera is for its incredible heat dissipation capabilities. And here it is from the back here. And again, you can see the vent on the sides. We have a bunch of ports. Let me just pop these open. This is what the ports look like on the side. You have a full-size HDMI, you have a USB-C, a micro USB, you have a headphone jack, and you have a mic jack at the top there. So looking at it from the top, this camera is a lot different than any of the other Sony cameras I've ever used. It has a lot of custom buttons here, 1, 2, 3, but they're also preset to ISO, white balance, and iris, which stands for the aperture diaphragm. That's what iris means. Now, the shutter button is right here, so you would press this to take a photo, and you have a zoom lever here if you have a power zoom lens. If you have a power zoom lens that has a motor inside it, and it'll automatically zoom the lens for you. So I don't have a power zoom lens with me. I'm actually going to use the 16 to 35 millimeter lens for this demonstration here. So this is what I'm going to use. But anyway, looking at it from the top, you have the hot shoe here. Now this is a smart hot shoe, and that is where the audio XLR unit goes. It slides into that hot shoe. I'm actually not going to go over this in this video because this is going to take a video in itself going over how this works. It's fairly complicated, but it's not that hard to use, believe it or not. All right, so again, looking at it from the top, we have a record button. We have this little button here, which is like a navigation tool. So you can push down on that and click it, or you can like move it around. You see how it moves? So you can use that to navigate in the menu, or if you want to move a focus point around the screen, for example, you can use that. Looking at it from the front, there's another button here. Now this button is set to a record button. It's another custom button, but by default it is record. And this button here is the lens release button. You need to press that to take a lens off. So let me actually mount a lens now so you can see what that looks like. There is the full frame sensor. You can see right there. And let me show you how to mount a lens in case you've never done that before. You have a white dot on the top of the lens there, and there's a white dot on the flange. You have to line up those dots like that, and then twist the lens, and then it clicks into place. And that click is the lock mechanism that you can release by pressing this button. So if you press this button, you could then untwist the lens, but it won't twist by default. So now I have to press that button, now it'll twist off. And I could remove the lens, but you can actually hear it lock into place. So now it's clicked back into place. And here we are back at the top of the camera. All right, guys, so one other thing, if you're a total beginner, you might not know, the way the lens works is you have to twist this to zoom it. It doesn't zoom automatically, so you do have to turn this in order to zoom the lens, and you can see the numbers. So it's going from 16 millimeter all the way to 35 millimeter. That's what that means, and you have to actually twist it. If you're using manual focus, you can use this dial to focus the camera lens manually. So let me just show you what it looks like on the back of this thing. We have this slide lever here for the on-off switch, which is interesting. You have a dial here. You have custom button here, which is default focus magnify. You got the function button. You have the control dial here that spins and also acts as buttons. And then there's the center button inside the dial. You have the playback button and you have the garbage can button. And then of course you have this awesome screen that comes out and fully articulates like so. And it turns that far as well. Plenty of clearance for the cables on the side to have this open and aiming forward like so if you're using it as a selfie type camera situation. There's also a dial here that you can turn. So on the side of the camera here is where you put the memory cards. So what you got to do is you got to slide that down and then it pops open like so. Now I'm just going to put one memory card in for now. And I have a UHS-2 SanDisk right here. It's Extreme Pro and it's 300 megabits, which is really fast, and you'll get pretty good performance using this card. Now the CF Express Type A cards are the best possible options, but they are very expensive. So if you're not willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a card, then you would want to look at a card like this, in my opinion. So you can put multiple cards in here. I'm just going to put one in for now, and it goes this way, like so. I always put it in the wrong way for some reason. It goes like that. And you put the other card in here, and then you can have the camera write to both cards at the same time, which if you're doing professional work, I highly recommend that. This way you have a redundant file structure here. Or you can set it up so it records onto this one until it runs out of space, and then it will continue recording on the next card, for example. A couple different ways you can configure that, but that's where the memory card goes. All right, guys, so when you boot the camera up for the first time by sliding this toggle here, you are going to see this. You're going to be presented with the language that you need to select. So I'm just going to hit the center button here. This little button right there in the center is the enter button pretty much. So I'm going to enter the date and time, and I live in New York, so that is correct for me. I'm going to do that setting. Sounds good. Now it is February 25th. 2022 at the time of this recording, and it is 1:08 p.m. All right, and I just hit the OK button when I'm done. It's telling me about the Imaging Edge app. Click OK, and there we have it. So this is what the camera looks like at default. Now, if you're a total beginner and you are not familiar with how cameras work, especially Sony cameras, you're like new, and you're looking at all this information and you have no idea like what this stuff means. Like if you're one of those people, then I recommend first, if you want to use your camera, to do this. Go into the mode and then change it to this, that green one there. All right, guys, so here we are in full auto mode, and you could notice here that this is a photography mode. But it will work in both photography and video, as you'll see in a second. But notice here on the top left, that is the scene recognition technology icon, and the camera's trying to figure out what it's looking at right now. And because I have the lens pointed into the desk, it's pitch black. So it's showing super low light, basically, is what that means. But you'll see that change in a second. And also notice up here, this is how many photos I can take. It's in JPEG mode, so it's telling me I can take 10,000 photos pretty much. 12 megapixel. It's set to JPEG mode right now, and touch to focus. And that flashing thing is the steady shot. So let me just show you, if you turn dials, like it doesn't do anything. If you hit the function button, it'll bring up a menu, and one option you can do is you can turn steady shot on and off, which is pretty sweet, but otherwise you don't really have that many options. You can see how everything's grayed out because you're in full auto mode. You can change a couple of things. So this option right here on the top left, that's your drive mode, and right now it's set to single shot. That's what this stands for. So when you press the button down, it'll focus and it'll just take one photo. That's what single shot means. So because I'm aimed at the desk right now, that's not going to work. But if you scroll down here, this is where you can change it to continuous shooting mode. So if you want it to be like, brrr, rattling off photos, you can set this, and notice the little arrows. You can go left and right there to change it. So you have high plus, that'll give you your fastest frames per second, and then you can slow it down. I usually have it set to middle when I use that. Great for portrait photography and things, because you know how it is. Eyes are always, one eye's closed or whatever. Now you got self timer down here, and that is great for if you want to have the camera count down when you go to take a photo, and you can change that time as well from 2 seconds to 10 to 5. Another pretty cool feature. Now you have self timer continuous. This is a great option for like family portraits and stuff, because it'll actually rattle off 3 images after the timer goes. So you're more likely to have everybody's eyes opened. Now all this other stuff is grayed out because we're in full auto, but this is where the bracket settings and stuff are for more advanced photography and stuff. Now if I go back to the function menu here, you also have focus mode. Now if you click on that, you can change it from automatic AF, which is what I recommend leaving it on. If you're a beginner, it'll automatically switch to AFC if you're trying to track a moving subject. and it'll use AFS basically when there's nothing moving. And that's what AFA does. It automatically decides which one to use. Now, if you want to use manual focus, you can go down here to MF, and that stands for manual focus. You could use that if you like, if you're using lenses that don't have autofocus built into them. But again, if you're a full-fledged beginner, just leave it at AFA for now. I just wanted to make you aware of those settings. Let me show you how this thing works really quick in full auto mode. I have this little lab scene set up here, and notice how it's automatically focusing on that face. You can see the facial recognition is turned on. I can turn that on and off. But what I wanted to show you is how it prioritizes it. So I can just take a photo, like so, or I can just touch around the screen if I want and change the focus point, and notice how it's touch tracking. That's what that little box is, touch to track. Now you can change that by hitting that little box up there. You see the little box? You can change it from touch focus to touch tracking to off. But I prefer having it on touch tracking. And notice how that it's on the face, it's touch tracking. You could move the face around and it'll just track the subject. Oh, also notice how the little icon up here changed to people. So it thinks it's taking a portrait now. But watch this, if I hit the record button, now it's recording video. And if I click on that face, it's going to touch to track that face. Now watch this. I could move the face around and it's going to track that face. You'll see the depth of field change. Now also, watch when I click on the background while recording video. You see how it transitions nice and smooth? And you can change the speed of that transition by changing the focus transition speed in the menu. But I just wanted to show you how this works in full auto. So you can record video and you can take photos very easily. Again, press this button, it'll focus and take the photo, record to record video. If you hit the playback button on the back of the camera, which is underneath the wheel, you could then go into the playback menu, and if you turn the dial on the back of the camera, you can cycle through the different photos and videos. And if you hit the center button, you can play the video. Like so. So that is the basics of using full auto modes. All right, so if you're one of those people that fits in the like total beginner category, I really think it's a good idea for you guys to take the camera now, leave it in full auto like I just showed you, and get out there and start using it. I don't want you to get overwhelmed with all these settings, and it's just overwhelming. And I'm afraid you'll kind of get paralyzed and then you just be afraid to use the camera. I highly recommend just leaving it in auto for a bit, get out there for a couple hours, couple days, maybe even a few weeks, like really start using the camera. You're gonna get more comfortable with it. You'll get used to taking videos and taking photos, and then come back to this video and then continue watching, and that'll bring you into the next level of setting it up for like beginner oriented users. All right, so let me get into some more settings here for those looking for more information on this quick start guide. And don't forget, we're going to do the beginner's guide. That'll be out in probably a week, and I will cover a lot more information in that. So if I miss something in here, please understand that the beginner's guide is coming. I'm trying to make this video a little bit shorter than an hour and a half, for example. All right, so what I wanted to show you guys is when you go into the menu. So just fundamentally, I just wanted to go over the menu quickly here. So how it works is it's got all these tabs on the left, and you basically just move to the right to get deeper into the menu system. For example, right now, my menu settings, if I go to the right, now I'm in the my menu setting area. Now I'm on add item. And if I go to the right, now I can add an item to the my menu area. So it just keeps cascading over to the right, and then you just go left to go back. And then you can go down and so forth. You can go in, down, and that's how it works. So that's just a basic of how the menu system operates. Another cool thing is down here, this garbage can. If you don't know what something means, for example, like auto slow shutter, if you hit the garbage can button, it'll give you an example of what it means. It gives you like a brief description. Now, sometimes these descriptions aren't that good, but most of the time it's very informative, and it'll help you out. It's actually a different menu if you're in photo mode versus video mode. And right now I'm in full auto, which is technically a photo mode. So it's not going to let me change a lot of stuff in here. But I did want to show you if you want to get off JPEG mode. So you can go in here and change that to RAW if you like. It's set to JPEG though. I'm just going to leave it there. And another option I wanted to tell you is the file format. You can go in there and change that. I have it set to 4K, but it's warning you that you're not in movie mode. So that's why that came up. By default, the camera was in this HD mode, and it was at 60 frames per second. So I did change that right here. Notice how it's at 60p. This is where the camera was at default in auto mode. So I did change that. I wanted to show you. So you can change your movie settings to 4K even though you're in full auto mode. It does allow you to change that. but it warns you with this message all the time because you are in photography mode. Now, if I hit the mode button here, I could then go back up to video mode here, like so. Let's start up here on the top left. This is your exposure mode, and this is a flexible manual exposure mode. Here you have your time that you can record for on your memory card. So that's how many hours you'll be able to record video at these current settings. So these are the current settings. It's in HD, so that's 1080, and it's at 60p, and it's at 50 megabits per second. And then the bit depth is 420 at 8-bit. Now, below that, that little icon there stands for steady shot or image stabilization. So that is turned on. And then this right below that is touch to track. That's what that is. Now over here you have metering mode. You have your white balance. You have dynamic range optimizer there. You have your picture profile. So it's by default set to PP11, which is S Cinetone. Sony gave that to us on this camera, which is sweet. Now down here you have iris, which is aperture. It's also that AV stands for aperture as well, and that's set to f2.8 for now. And then you have your shutter speed over here where it says shutter. Then you have facial recognition over here. You have focus area, and then you have focus mode. If I go into the menu system, I just wanted to show you a few things really quick. All right, so one other thing I wanted to show you guys was this zoom option. If you go into the zoom area, you can go over to the right, and I have it set to clear image zoom. It was set to optical zoom only by default. So if you change it to clear image zoom, you could then zoom while recording video. Watch this. I'm just going to show you how it works. So it's zooming in and out, and I'm using the lever right here on the camera. So you remember how I said it only works with a power zoom lens? That's true if you want to actually optically zoom, but in this case I'm digitally zooming, and it's a cool feature. I just wanted to let you know that that is available, so you can still zoom a little bit. It'll give you a little extra leeway when using the camera, even if you're using a zoom lens, but it's especially helpful for prime lenses and things like that. All right, so in here we have Face IAF. And if you go into here, you can change the priority of Face IF. When you're in full auto mode though, it won't let you change this. It's just on by default. So if you go to human, you can change that to animal. So that's where you would go to change if you want to take pictures of your pets or whatever. Also, guys, if you go in here to media, this is where you can change your media settings. And like I said, you have the two different memory cards. So this is where you can go and configure all that stuff. If you go to recording mode, this is where you can set the mode. That'll decide whether it's going to duplicate the second card or if it's going to use the second card for video, for example. All those options are in here. Now, notice this option here. This is called F for flexible. It's a new feature. It's new to me, but it's actually really cool. And what it does is it allows you to turn on and off the 3 navigation options, like the tri-navi. So you have aperture there. The A stands for aperture. This one is ISO, and this one that says TV is your shutter speed. And notice on the bottom of this wheel it says shutter. So if you press that button, this control wheel is buttons as well. So if you press that button, notice how there's a little like no sign on the TV icon now. See where it comes and goes? Look. So that's basically turning off that function. So now shutter speed's not going to do anything if you turn this. See? Shutter speed's not changing. But if I press that button on the bottom and now turn it, now the shutter speed will change. So this is an interesting exposure mode. I really think it's a good option, and you can lock down these settings as you wish. So on the top of the camera, you have this button here, the number 1 button. That stands for the aperture. They're calling it iris here, but that stands for aperture. So if I hit the 1 button and now you look at the back, notice how the aperture there now has that little no symbol. Same thing with the ISO button. You could turn it on and off right there, like so. But these buttons, if you have them all on by default, have a wheel associated with them. So this wheel on the top back here is the ISO button. You can see the ISO changing there on the bottom right. So that's how you would control the ISO. The aperture is the dial on the front of the camera, which is this guy right here. So if I turn this guy with my finger, that will change the aperture. Watch this. See that? So I can put it at f2.8, for example. And then if I turn this dial, again, that's going to change the shutter speed. So that's how the exposure works when using this mode. So if we go into the menu here, let me show you some of these settings. Now, if you're a more advanced user, you're definitely going to want to change your video settings. So let me go in there and show you how to do that quick. So if you go into file format right here, this is where you can change it to 4K. Now I recommend using XAVCS 4K. That is the best option in my opinion for quality to file size. So the larger file sizes are these ones on the bottom with that SI. The SI are huge file sizes. The HS is a very small file size, but it's a hard file for computers to read. So the XAVCS 4K would be the option that I would recommend. So I'm going to select that. And then if you go in here to movie settings, this is where you can select your frame rate. And you can do 4K 60 on this camera in full frame mode, which is amazing. And you could also do 120p in 4K, which is unbelievable. You know, one of the reasons why people buy this camera is pretty much for those two features. Full frame 60 and full frame 120 is unbelievable. And you have to get the Sony a7S III or this FX3 to get those features. And so now I set it to 24p because that's what I normally use for filming. Now here is your record setting. I would recommend setting it to this option right here, 100 megabits, 422 10-bit. That's going to give you the best possible color quality, and it's going to produce really awesome quality footage. So I recommend having it set there. Now, if we scroll down, there's a couple other options I recommend changing here. Lens compensation, I would turn distortion comp on or to auto, and I would leave these two in auto as well. And that will fix lens distortion compensation. It'll just fix it automatically. Now, if we scroll down, it is a shame that this doesn't have the lens breathing compensation like the A7 IV, but what are you gonna do? And a couple other settings here. Your audio recording level here, if you go in there, this is where you can adjust that. And right now it is definitely set too high for what I'm doing. You could look at your meter. You want it to be like right around the 12 there. So you could see 18 is pretty good. It's peeking out right around the 12 from this distance. Just keep that in mind. Menu. All right, so steady shot, you can go in there and you can turn on active to get some more stabilization if you want. Set to standard by default though. Zoom, now again, if you're using a power zoom lens, this is where you can control the zoom speed and things like that. So white balance, you can go in here, it's set to auto. Highly recommend hard setting that to whatever your current environment is. I have my studio set to 5500 for the lights. Now color and tone, if you go in here, this is where you can change your picture profile. Now, if you're a beginner and you don't want to use picture profiles at all, including that cool S-Cinetone one that Sony has given us here, you can just turn this off. But if you're a more advanced user and you want to use S-Log3, you're going to have to go into picture profile 8 here, and then notice how it says S-Log3. And then you have the color mode, S-Gamut 3 Cine. But you can click that and you can change it to S-Gamut or S-Gamut 3. That's up to you. I'm going to experiment with these. I honestly don't know which one is going to work best for me yet, but I'm going to leave it here for default because I actually just started using picture profiles myself. So if we go back to the menu now we have the picture profile set to S-Log, which is how I plan on using this camera. You can turn your zebra display on and off, but you'll notice there's already a button here that says zebra. So you can just turn that on by hitting that button. See how it just said zebra on? And then if you press it, it turns zebra off. Really, I mean, it's really cool how they have this set up default like that. Same thing with peaking. You can turn it on and off by just pressing the peaking button. But it's also in the menu, so you can play with it in the menu and adjust the settings. How I have it set is right here. I have it set to 70, and I usually have it set to on when I'm filming in front of the camera using S-Log. And this way I can see my skin tone exposure. All right, so if we scroll down here, you have autofocus transition speed. So it's set to 5 right now, which is good. Sensitivity is set to responsive. That's also pretty good if you want it to be responsive. I'm just going to leave it at default for now. And there is another setting here I wanted to show you guys right here. Gamma Display Assist, you're going to want to turn that on. If you turn that on, then when you're using S-Log, it'll automatically kind of fix the contrast for you so you get a better indication of what your exposure looks like. That's what the Gamma Display Assist does. So now the other thing I need to change is the shutter speed. So I would put it at 1/50th of a second because I'm recording at 24p. And now I just need to change the ISO to the base ISO, which is, in this case, 640. So the base ISO when using S-Log is 640. So you really do want to have the camera set to that when recording video if possible. And you know, you might have to use an ND filter on the front to slow the shutter speed down. I talked about that in my recent studio video if you want to check that out. All right guys, so just a couple other things I wanted to show you really quick. In the menu here under Operation Customize, you can go in here and change your settings. This is where you can custom configure your keys to your liking. You can also custom configure the function menu. If I hit the function menu button, this is your function menu. Now you can customize this how you see fit. Like I was saying, you can go into the function menu settings and you can custom configure your function menu. The top side is for photos, the bottom side is for videos, and you can just go in here and select it. And then once you're in here, you could then change what this button does. So for example, I could change it to autofocus transition speed here. See that? And just go back in there and put it right back. All right, so what else I wanted to show you in here is if you scroll down, you have touch operation. Now this is where you can turn touch to focus off. If you don't want to use touch operation, I recommend turning it off in here. And you can actually change the sensitivity from standard to sensitive, and you can change the mode to whichever one you like, touch focus or touch tracking or off. So that's where that setting is if you need it. Now another option here is monitor brightness. You can change this to manual mode, or if you click it, you can switch it to sunny weather mode. It'll make it much easier to see the screen when you're out in the field. And you can change the quality to high, which I'm going to do. And now if you scroll down here to power settings, this option is very important, auto power off temperature. You want to change this to high. And that'll make sure that the camera doesn't turn off when it starts to get warm. It'll have to get really, really hot before it shuts off. Don't worry, nothing bad will happen to your camera. You're not going to damage it by changing this setting. And if you're hooking up an external monitor, you can go in here and change your settings for the output in here. HDMI info display, for example, you might not want the information on the screen. You could turn that off here. And then setup option in here, you have options for the record lamps that light up when you hit record. You could turn that off. Fan, you can turn the fan on and off or have it on auto. This is where you can turn the remote control on and off. And version is where your current firmware version is for the camera. So you can see this one is set to version 1.00. Now let me show you how to change it just to regular manual mode. If you go into the menu here, right here, see where it says shooting mode? All right, so notice how you got exposure mode and then you have exposure control type. So what flexible is, it's pretty much all the modes in one. But if you change this back to this mode, PASM mode, so now I have the camera set to regular exposure mode and you can see it automatically put it into manual mode, because that's pretty much what I was using. But you could notice now on the screen, you don't see all the wheels. You don't have the option to turn those other ones off. It's just straight up manual. So you can see in this mode, the buttons don't do what they do in the flexible mode. If I turn this, it's still turning the shutter speed. If I turn the one on the front, it's changing the aperture. But this one is not working for the ISO for whatever reason in this mode. So I would have to set that to make that ISO. But in the flexible mode, it's automatically set. So I really like that mode. If you guys are using this camera, I'd recommend having it in that flexible mode just because of the ease of use and how you can just turn off certain things if you want. Let me go back into the menu and show you that again. Flexible exposure mode. And here's the little description for it, which is just awesome. I need custom key settings, so you can change that if you want. Click OK. And now if you look at the camera again, see how those features are up there? Like I said, that mode's new to me and I'm loving it so far, just using it as is. All right, so that about wraps up this quick start guide. Now, don't worry, I am coming out with a full-fledged beginner's guide for the Sony FX3, but I wanted to just come out with this video so it's not so long, so you can just get up and running quickly. That's the purpose of this video, and I hope it achieved that for you guys that needed something like that. Also, just below the video, there'll be links with recommended accessories and things like that that you might need for the Sony FX3. All right, guys, I really hope you got what you were looking for in this video. Be sure to do me a favor and give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you want to be notified when I come out with more videos about the FX3, because they will be coming soon, and I'm looking forward to it. So catch up with you next time. All right, take care.